A handmade sweater can take 40, 50 or even up to 80 hours to knit. And that is a lot of time spent doing something that ends up sitting at the back of your closet. Over the last couple of years, I have knitted a lot of sweaters, and some of them were incredibly fun to make, and they just ended up never being really worn that often. And others have become true wardrobe staples that I reach for again and again, season after season, year after year. So that's why I started to ask myself a question. If I would have to start over with my handmade wardrobe completely from scratch, what are the patterns that I would actually want to knit twice? So I have 10 patterns to share with you, ranging from cozy sweaters all the way up to lightweight summer garments. And let's get started with the first pattern, which is one of my absolute favorites. Garment number 1. This is the sweater number 28, which is a pattern by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And I absolutely adore this sweater. Now, I knitted it because I saw Carmen from the Knitting a Good Yarn podcast talking about it in one of her episodes, and she shared how much she enjoyed the process of knitting this sweater. She talked about this meditative rhythm of those alternating sections of ribbing and garter stitch. And when I watched that podcast, that was where during a more rushed phase of the year, it was I think late November, and I think many of you can relate to that feeling when, leading up to Christmas, there are so many things going on, and I was just craving a very soothing and relaxing knit at that time. And although I was not completely convinced how much wear I would get out of the sweater, because as you might be able to see, it is very boxy, it is very oversized, and it looks quite modern, at least to me. I wasn't really sure if it would, fit with my whole aesthetic and the other pieces that I have in my wardrobe. But I wanted to knit on something very relaxing, like I said, and I already had some yarn that I knew would work great with it, so I decided to cast it on. And I do have to say I am so glad that I did, because this has truly become one of my most worn pieces throughout the last 2 years since I made it. And it's just wonderful. I love the fit. I love that it is oversized, and I still feel, although it is so oversized and cozy, I still feel very elegant and chic and modern in it when I wear it. I feel like it goes with everything, and it's what I reach for during every cold day in fall and winter, basically. Let me tell you a bit about the construction now. So you basically cast on at the neck, and as you can see, mine is quite long. I actually doubled the neck length compared to what's written in the pattern, because I do really like to fold it inward when wearing it like this, and then you just knit down in the round. And since this pattern does not contain any short row shaping to raise the back neck, you do have this, this crease, this excess fabric that bunches up right below the collar. And I personally do not mind this look. I feel like it adds to this design, but I know a lot of people don't like it. So if you are one of those people, just keep this in mind when thinking about whether or not to make this pattern yourself. So then you basically knit down in the round, and there are also, I think, no decreases whatsoever in the sleeves. So it's just very easy to knit and very mindless, and there are a few patterns that gave me that much enjoyment to knit than this piece. And not only that, I also love to wear it, so it's just like a win on all fronts. And yeah, I can definitely highly recommend it. The yarn that I used is actually a combination of 2 yarns. I unraveled a sweater, a store-bought sweater that had belonged to my father-in-law. That was a 100% cashmere yarn, and I took the time to unravel the whole thing, and it was like a very light cream colored cashmere. I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell when looking at this. It is slightly heathered but not very visible. And the other yarn that I used is one from Hill Country Weavers. It is called Naturally HCW ACL, which stands for Alpaca Cashmere Love, because this is an alpaca, cashmere and silk blend. And it was a lovely undyed light natural gray color. And I think those two are working perfectly together. I am also super happy that there are hardly any pills on my sweater, although I have been wearing it so much and although there is so much cashmere in it. But yeah, it just has held up great over time, and I couldn't be happier with this pattern or the sweater that I have here. Like I said, I did not make any modifications besides doubling the collar length, and if I were to knit this again, I would do exactly the same because I really like the way the collar looks. And yeah, it's just the perfect sweater, at least for me. Garment number 2. My next choice is actually quite different because it has a completely different fit, but nevertheless it has become a wonderful wardrobe staple for me. And this is the sweater number 12, again also by my favorite things knitwear. Let me give you a closer look first, and then I'm going to talk about this design. So after I had completed the sweater number 28 and I was loving it so much, I had a look at the pattern portfolio from my favorite things to see what other designs she had that I would like to knit, and I came across this piece. And because I do love stripes and I also really like broken rib, I decided to cast it on. Now this is also knitted from the top down, and it has a raglan shaping, as you might be able to tell here. It has like quite a broad number of stitches here in the raglan line, but I think it looks very beautiful. Again, there are also no short rows to raise the back neck, so it sits up a bit higher on the neck, but I personally do really like it. It is a lot more fitted, but it was just as enjoyable to knit, and I really like how it came out. There is one thing that I would change if I were to knit this again, and this has to do with the yarn. So the yarn that I used was very kindly gifted to me by Nakyang Yarn. It is called a cashmere, and it is an alpaca, not an alpaca, a cashmere yarn like the name suggests. And as you might be able to tell, there are a number of pills on the sweater already, and I mean, it's to be expected. It is a super soft and enjoyable to knit with yarn, but since I just hold it like as one strand, it started pilling pretty much right away. So if I were to knit this again, I think I would hold it together with a strand of a silk mohair yarn to give it some more strength. And it would have made a lot of sense in hindsight to do this from the very beginning, because I also didn't get gauge with the yarn. So the gauge that I got with this yarn is 26 stitches and 40 rows over 10 centimeters or 4 inches. And the pattern is actually written for 22 stitches and 32 rows over 10 centimeters or 4 inches. And that meant I had to knit a larger size in order to compensate for the different gauge. I think I made a size large compared to an extra small what I would have usually chosen. So it would have made a lot of sense to just hold another yarn with it to get the correct gauge and avoid the pilling, but I just didn't think about it at that time. I also think I'm going to insert the B-roll of me wearing the sweater. The sweater would have benefited from like a couple of inches or centimeters of additional length, both in the sleeves and the body. But I was playing a bit of yarn chicken and I didn't have quite enough yarn of the gray, so the main color, and it just wasn't possible. But if I would knit it again, I think I would make it just a little bit longer. But nevertheless, I still really like how it came out, and I wear it a ton in the winter. Garment number 3. So 2 years ago, I got myself a spinning wheel, and last year I challenged myself to spin up a whole sweater's quantity. And because the yarn that I spun up was a bit more eye-catching, and there was like a lot going on with regards to the different colors in the yarn, I was specifically looking for a more simpler pattern that would go well with this, more colorful yarn. And I came across the Melanie by Marzena Kolakczek, and I decided to cast it on, and I'm so glad that I did. I think this is an absolutely beautiful pattern. I love Marzena Kolakczek's patterns, and this is even available for free, which I think is so generous of her. I'm going to give you a closer look. So this is how the sweater came out. using my hand spun yarn, and I am absolutely in love with it. So the yarn is fiber that I got from Woolen Toe. I'm going to link her in the description box for you, along with everything else that I'm talking about in the video. And I used 2 different colorways, so 2 braids of each, 400 grams in total. And I spun up each colorway on its own, and then I applied it together as a 2-ply to create this look, this effect. And yeah, I just love the way it's looking. The only thing that is bothering me a bit is that I used a very fine merino fiber, and as you might be able to tell, it is pilling quite a bit, as it is to be expected with merino. So this could be something, you know, if I were to knit this again, to think about if it would benefit from holding it together with something like a silk mohair to add some strength. But overall, I'm super happy with it. It is knitted from the top down, so you it has like a drop shoulder construction, and it is fitted. And in the pattern picture you can see that there is actually a folded hem at the bottom, and also on the sleeves. Her sleeves are not full length, but I decided to make mine full length. But since I was playing a bit of yarn chicken yet again, didn't have quite enough to do the folded hem, which I would have preferred. So I did some ribbing instead, and also on the sleeves. And in the very end you add this collar which stands up a bit, which I also really like. So yeah, I think the only thing I would change if I were to knit it again is that I would do the folded hem on the body, and probably also on the sleeves, but I would still opt to make the sleeves full length. And I mean, it fits great, I'm happy with it, but I think it could benefit from like just a little bit more positive ease. So maybe I would knit like a size up when knitting it again. But overall, a lovely pattern, and one that I can highly recommend. And I think it would also look really great in a more drapey yarn, something a bit shiny, similar to what she is wearing in the pattern pictures. So maybe something with a silk or an alpaca or cashmere content. So you might have noticed that the first 3 patterns that I showed you are all very simple and more minimalistic, but the next garment that I would like to show you shows that a bit more intricate pieces also can become true wardrobe staples. And I would like to talk about the Porcelain Damask Sweater by Lene Holme Samsø. Garment number 4. So Lene Holme Samsø has a very popular pattern called the Porcelain Sweater, and that is an all-over stranded colorwork piece. And I absolutely love this design, but I was just not sure if I would get regular use out of it, or just wear it enough, because it's not that cold here in Germany where I live. And that's why when I saw that she announced that she was working on a design that was similar to the porcelain sweater, but it had textured sections instead of the colorwork, I knew immediately I had to make it. And I think just a couple of days after it came out, I cast it on. And as you can see, you have these textured sections that are created simply by knitting and purling. And overall, the look is similar to the porcelain sweater, but of course you do not have the colorwork. And this is also knitted from the top down. It has a drop shoulder construction and a more loose fit, but mine actually has a lot less positive ease than what's called for in the pattern. So the pattern calls for 15 to 25 centimeters, which corresponds to 6 to 10 inches of positive ease, and mine only has 9 centimeters or 3.5 centimeters. And I think it's absolutely fine. I'm happy with the fit, but if I were to knit it again, I think I would just knit the size up to give myself a little bit more positive ease, because I do really like this comfy, oversized, snuggly look of it. As for the yarn, I chose the very classic combination of Knitting for Olive's merino held together with a strand of their soft silk mohair. And the colorways that I used are Nordic Beach and Oat. And I absolutely love this, more cool toned beige that this gave me. So I was super happy. It was my first time using Knitting for Olive yarns, or at least the combination of those 2 yarns. And I really like how it came out. I mean, if you want to have those textured sections be even more visible, and pop more. I think you would benefit from just omitting the strand of the silk mohair and just using the merino yarn or like a different yarn. But I do have to say I really like this fuzzy and blended look, and I do get a lot of wear out of the sweater in the colder months of the year. Garment number 5. So far we have only talked about sweaters, but if I were to start over with my handmade wardrobe, I think a cardigan would be for sure one of the first pieces I would cast on, because I just find them so versatile. And the pattern that I would like to talk about now is the Sunday cardigan by Petite Knit. Now this one actually has a bit of an interesting story, because I originally purchased the yarn to make a different pattern with it. I purchased Ask from the Norwegian brand Hillesvåg when we were on vacation in Norway, and I had originally intended to knit the Zweig sweater by Caitlin Hunter with it, because it was super popular at that time. That was way back in 2019. And I actually got 2 different colors of the Ask, and I cast it on and I just couldn't make it work. It's like a circular yoke construction that you knit from the top down, and it contains like some color work and some lace on the yoke, and it just was way too tight. Then I frogged the whole thing, I started again, it just didn't look good, and I was very frustrated and I gave up. And then I was looking for a different project to make with the yarn, because I really liked the yarn. And when I actually purchased it in Norway in the yarn store, there was a sample of the Sunday sweater by Petite Knit hanging there as a sample. And I really liked the look of it, but I just thought I would get more use out of a cardigan, and that's why I opted for the Sunday cardigan instead. The only challenge for me was that Ask is a sport weight yarn and the Sunday cardigan is written for a bulky weight gauge. So it actually calls for 2 strands of a silk mohair yarn held together with a worsted weight yarn. And that meant that I had to rework the math of the pattern completely. So I had to cast on with a different number of stitches and then, calculate every step of the way. But I think it turned out great, and I absolutely love this piece. I mean, as you might be able to tell, I have been wearing this non-stop for the last 7 years, and it has started to felt a bit, so I am actually considering knitting it again, but I would probably choose the same colorway and maybe the same yarn base, or like a different yarn base from Hillesvåg, but it's just a perfect cardigan in my opinion. There was one thing that I thought was a bit tedious about the pattern, and that is how the buttonholes are done. Let me see if I can show you, because that was actually a bit strange. You knit the button band as you go, but then in the end, I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell, you don't make a buttonhole while you knit, but you widen the space between 2 stitches, and then you stitch all around it and create the buttonhole that way. And I found that, just not very fun to do. It's a bit difficult to get the button through. So if I were to knit it again, I would just, make some buttonholes while I knit. But besides that, I think it was fun to knit. It was easy to knit. You start from the top and knit down, and in the end, you sew down the collar on the inside and it stands up a bit. And this is a recurring theme as well. I just like when the collar stands up a bit, and yeah, it's very cozy and snuggly. It goes with everything and I just love it. If I were to knit it again, I think I would also make it just a little bit longer. Yet again, I was playing yarn chicken, and because I had intended, to use the yarn for a different pattern, and I had like one more skein in a different colorway, it would have given me more yarn, but I basically knit till I ran out. And I mean, there's maybe like 3 centimeters, or what's that, like bit more than 1 inch that I would add to the body if I could, but it's not bothering me at all. It's completely fine, but I'm actually really considering knitting this cardigan again, just because I like it so much and it's proven to be like a true wardrobe staple for me. So one thing that was so important and eye-opening for me while going through this process is that I learned that it's not really about finding the perfect pattern. It is more about understanding what you love to wear and what just works in your day-to-day life. And that just takes, some time to figure out, and also you need to give it some thought. And that is one thing that I absolutely love doing together with my online community, which is called the Handmade Wardrobe Circle. So we are all in the process of building a handmade wardrobe with intention, a wardrobe that we love, that we, are excited to put on in the morning, and creating pieces that we want to wear over and over again for years and years to come. And that means in some months we are, assessing our wardrobe, seeing what's missing, seeing what we are drawn to and what maybe just stays in the wardrobe. And in other months we are talking about fit, about color. Sometimes we are encouraging each other to finish our whips or frog things that are not working out. And overall it's just a very supportive and warm space, and I absolutely love the people that have come together there. And if this is something that interests you, I'm going to put the link in the description box and also on the screen so that you can check it out. I do have to say it completely changed my own outlook on creating a handmade wardrobe with intention throughout this year, and it's just so much fun. Okay, so let's get back to the next garment now. Garment number 6. This is the cardigan I put on when I wanted to feel cozy and hugged. And I came across it when I was searching for a pattern that would be suitable for unspun yarn. So at the beginning of 2024, I first came across the concept of unspun yarn. And if you're not aware, it comes in those large plates, and it is basically yarn that is not spun at all. So it's just, the fiber gathered together, and as you can see, it's very fragile and you do have to be very mindful when knitting with it. So I had ordered 300 grams from Örnöer, which is a Swedish company. Their unspun yarn is called Nutiden, and this is one example as well. And the colorway that I ordered was called Livslinje, so a beautiful dusty pink. And when I started to knit with it, and I wanted to hold it like single-stranded, it was just breaking on me all the time, and I didn't really know how to make it work. So I decided to hold the yarn double, because I only had 300 grams and I was holding it double. I was looking for a very simple cardigan where the yarn would just be enough to make it. And then I came across the timepiece cardigan by Albina McLaughlin, and I really liked the overall look of it. It is knitted from the top down. You have this integrated button band that's done in double knitting, and there's also the option to do buttonholes and buttons, of course, or even pockets, but I just wanted to do this very simplistic version. And I did, and I absolutely loved to wear this piece, and it was just so cozy, and I just felt like, I was in a giant hug whenever I put it on. I can't really explain it, and it was my favorite cardigan. And then one day I was in a rush and I was doing laundry and I was not thinking, and I just threw it in the washing machine, not even in the wool cycle. And when I took it out, let me show it to you. This is how it looked. So it's not at a point anymore where I can wear it. As you can clearly tell, it is completely felted. I mean, you can still see the beautiful depth of color, and yeah, I kept it for almost 2 years now, because it just reminds me of this wonderful cardigan that I had and that I then ruined in the washing machine. But for the time I had it, it was just the best wardrobe staple. Because I had so little yarn, I did make the sleeves a bit shorter. So I think I did basically only 3/4 length sleeves, and I just did no decreases all throughout the sleeve. And in the end, I did one round where I was knitting together all the stitches, so knit 2 together, and then I did 1 round of purling, and then I just bound off. And yeah, it was just great. And would I knit this again? Yes, of course. And I do have plans. I have purchased a commercial yarn in a very similar color. Let me hold up those two so that you can see. So I think it is a very good replacement. This is Snevnuk by Camarose, and this is a wonderfully soft blown yarn. I have more than enough. I think I have maybe 600 grams of that. And I do want to knit another very simple cardigan for myself, similar to the timepiece cardigan. I'm not sure if I want to replicate the exact same pattern again, or if I'm going to do something, with a similar vibe. But thinking about it now, I think that's what I should do, because I did love the timepiece cardigan so much. And I mean, it would just be the easiest way for me to use this beautiful yarn and then get another timepiece cardigan that I can start wearing over and over again in the fall and winter. Garment number 7. Now, this next cardigan is also one of my more recent makes. I finished it in April of this year, and this is the Oxford by Marie-Christine from Tricot Design MCL, and it's just such a beautiful and classic design. Let me show it to you. So this is how it looks, and I absolutely love the way it turned out. It is knitted from the top down, and it has this beautiful look of satin shoulders, but it's knitted completely in one piece. And in the end, you add this double knitted button band and also the neck band. Let me think. I did make one modification, and that is to the sleeves. So as you might be able to see in the pattern picture, her sleeves are quite wide, and I was not sure if I liked this look, and that's why I decided to do some decreases before I went into the ribbing. So mine has a bit more of a like slightly puffy sleeve look, which I do like, but I think in hindsight I would have also liked the more straight look, so both would be fine. I think this is a wonderful design. It is so classic, it goes with everything. I would definitely knit it again. If I were to knit it again, I might consider, you know, placing the buttons a bit differently. I mean, I think it would look better if there would be a button up top where you could, you know, have the option to close the whole thing, because as you might be able to tell now, yeah, I think you can see, it always, you know, stands up a little bit here, and I do not like that, but overall I'm super happy with this design. When I decided on the pattern, I was actually torn between a number of her patterns because she has just such a beautiful design aesthetic, and it was particularly between the Oxford and the Farandole, which I think is also lovely. It has, you know, this scalloped edge at the button band, but in the end I thought I would get more use out of a more classic version, and that's why I made the Oxford. The yarn is also something that I highly enjoyed working with. This was very kindly gifted to me. It is by Pasquale, called Pinta, and Pinta is a blend of, I think, merino, silk and rami, and I think you can see it has this lovely shine. It's subtle, but I think it makes the cardigan look very elevated and elegant, and it's also very soft, and it was just lovely to work with overall. I did hold the yarn double because it's a light fingering weight, and the cardigan, the pattern is written for a DK weight yarn, but yeah, that just worked out great, and I'm super happy with this cardigan as well, and I expect to get a lot of wear out of it during the next couple of years and seasons. Garment number 8. So far we have talked about sweaters and cardigans, but a couple of years ago I realized that there was one thing missing in my hand-knitted wardrobe, and that was summer garments, because it just, you know, expands the whole spectrum of when you can wear your hand knits. And this is when I decided to knit the top that I am wearing today, which is Yoni by Natasha Hornby. But this pattern also taught me a very valuable lesson, because sometimes I think the best thing you can do is just, you know, start over, give yourself some time to breathe, some time to think, and then, you know, have a look at the pattern again with a whole new excitement and appreciation. And that's exactly what happened here, because in 2024 I cast it on for the Yoni for the first time, and I used some yarn that I had naturally dyed myself. So the yarn was Iseya Bomulin, which is a blend of linen and cotton, and I got this on vacation in Portugal. We were in Lisbon and we visited Retrosaria Rosa Pomar, and I got the yarn and in a very neutral colorway, and I decided to dye it myself using nettles. And nettles give you like a very soft shade of yellow, like a vanilla color. And then I modified it with ferrous sulfate, and I was expecting to get like a dusty shade, like a sage green. And that's what I usually get when I dye on my standard yarns, which are all wool yarns or with a majority of wool content. But since it was a plant-based fiber yarn, the colorway came out a bit different than what I expected. I got like more of a light gray with a light green undertone, but I wasn't like too happy with the color. But I cast it on anyway, and it just, nothing was going according to plan. I think I didn't get gauge, so I had to recalculate the pattern. I made several mistakes in this beautiful lace panel here, and I only realized that like when I was way into the body, and the size was all wrong. It was way too big for me, and I just came to a point where I made the decision to frock the whole thing. And because I also wasn't too happy with the colorway, I decided, to not cast on right away, and then the yarn just sat in my stash. And I always knew I wanted to knit the yoni because I think it's such a beautiful design. So I made the decision to dye the yarn again, and this time I used logwood, and this is how it came out. Let me show you, that's all there is left. So as you can see, I was playing yarn chicken yet again. It seems to be a recurring theme throughout this video, but because I was not able to get gauge, I decided to purchase another yarn to hold it together with the bourmoline, and I went with Knitting for Olives Pure Silk, and I also dyed this with logwood, and this is how it came out. So as you can see, although those two skeins were dyed in the same dye pot, they took the dye very differently because of their different fiber contents. And this is also why the finished knitted fabric has a bit of a heathered look, but I personally quite like that. So as soon as I had dyed the yarn and then I cast it on, I immediately fell in love with the pattern again. I think it is such a beautiful and unique design. I love the look of it. I love the lace. I love the rounded hem and those rich stockinette sections, and I think it's just so pretty. And I worked on it over the course of a couple of weeks, and now I have recently finished it, and I have just worn it like a couple of times. But so I have to wait and see if it truly becomes a wardrobe staple for me, because yeah, I just didn't have enough time to test it out yet. But I included it in this list because I would happily knit it again. It was just such an enjoyable knit, and like I said, I think the design is just so beautiful. I think it would look great in like a cream or maybe a white colorway, similar to the one that Natasha Hornby is wearing in the pattern pictures. And yeah, I think that would be like a great addition to my personal handmade wardrobe. So I'm going to insert a clip so that you can see me wearing this piece. And yeah, I'm super happy with it. Let me tell you just a little bit about the construction. So it's knitted from the top down again. You cast on for the back neck, and then you pick up stitches for both sides of the front, and then you join it together. You knit flat until you reach the part under the arms, then you join in the round and knit down. There is one modification, one unintentional modification that I made, and that is to the lace panel. So I realized too late that my lace panel is shorter than what is written in the pattern. It is supposed to go down a lot more. I don't know what happened. I just missed that part, but nevertheless, I'm still super happy with how it looks. So I mean, if I were to knit it again, I'm not even sure if I might not just do the same thing again, because I just like the look of this shorter lace panel just as much as I like the original version in the pattern. Garment number 9. So the next pattern that I would like to talk about is the Anchor Tee by Petite Knit. Petite Knit has a whole anchor line. You have not only this tee, you also have like a sweater version, a cardigan, a dress for little girls, and I actually made the dress for girls first. I made that for one of my nieces, and I enjoyed the pattern so much that I wanted to make a version of it for myself. So I decided on the tee, and I'm super happy that I did, because I get so much wear out of this in the summer. Let me give you a closer look. So you have this ribbing section at the yoke, and then it is just plain stockinette stitch. And like I said, I am in love with this design. I also really like the color. I like the yarn. It's just a wonderful piece that I created here for my handmade wardrobe. So this tee is knitted from the top down as well. You knit the yoke, and there is no short row shaping to raise the back neck, so that's why the front sits up a bit higher, which again I personally don't mind, but I know that it's not all not everyone likes this, so I wanted to mention it. And then you do some increases in between those ribbed sections, and in the end you also do a couple of raglan increases in the stockinette portion before you join or before you knit the body down. I did do a couple of modifications to this pattern, which I think I would like to do again if I were to knit this again, and that's why I want to show them to you. So for once, usually the pattern ends with a section of ribbing, and then you do an Italian bind off, which is a sewn bind off, and it takes some bit of time to do. And I did it at first, but then when I put it on, I realized that it was like just a little bit too short for my liking. So I had to unpick the whole bind off, which was very tedious. And then I decided that I was not going to do that again, and that I wanted to have like a folded hem instead, like this one. So what I basically did is that I knitted exactly to the length that I wanted it to be. Then I did one round of purling. Then I changed to a smaller needle size, and then I knitted a couple of centimeters or inches again before I bound off. And as you just saw, I ran out of yarn yet again. So I was playing yarn chicken with pretty much every project. And that's why I had to use like the same yarn in a different colorway. Luckily, I had some. Okay, so apparently it is too hot here today, so the camera needed to take a break. But I think I was talking about the folded hem. So, you know, you basically knit a couple more rounds of stockinette with a smaller needle, then you bind off, and then you sew it down on the inside. And I also made a modification to the sleeves. So I basically, right after I had picked up the stitches under the arm and I was starting knitting the sleeves, I only did like 3 or 4 rounds of German short rows, and then I did like just a couple of like maybe 5 rounds of ribbing, and then I bound off. And so that gives, you know, I mean, I like the look of the design with the longer sleeves, but I also really like my version because it's just a little bit lighter and very appropriate for these very hot summer days, I think. And I also really like about this particular garment that since it's a cotton yarn, I used a Natura Just Cotton from DMC. I can simply throw it in the laundry together, you know, with the rest of our clothes, and it just comes out fine. So it is not very difficult to care for, and overall a piece I would love to knit again, and I can only highly recommend. Garment number 10. So this is one of the oldest pieces in my handmade wardrobe, but I still absolutely love to wear it, and it is the Night Sky by Heidi Kiermeier, and this is how it looks. I really like the design aesthetic of Heidi Kiermeier, and especially the Night Sky, but she has a number of beautiful patterns on top of that. But when I saw it, I immediately knew that I wanted to cast it on. So this one is actually knitted from the bottom up. So you start with this beautiful lace at the hem, and then you work your way up. And you have a circular yoke construction, which I usually do not like the fit of on me, because I feel like it tends to rise up whenever I lift my arms, but it's not the case whatsoever with this design. And what I also really like is that these double decreases that are done all throughout the yoke they look so beautiful that they are a design feature, and I just really like that. And then you also have this beautiful lace on the sleeves as well, and yeah, I think it's just overall a lovely pattern. This was also the first time that I used hand-dyed yarn to knit a garment. I used Igne by Ovis etc. And since I knitted a small size, I only needed 2 skeins of that, which was great. But because it is a hand-dyed yarn, I alternated skeins all throughout the garment. So I switched skeins every other row or round. And as for the size, I made the extra small for the body. And then because I do have a bit broader shoulders, I increased some stitches and I made the size small for the yoke portion. And I think that turned out great. Now, to be honest, I don't think this is the most flattering pattern for me to wear, because I do have quite broad shoulders and the lace and the way the sleeves fall really accentuates that. But nevertheless, I am in love with this elegant design and I absolutely love to wear it. Now, what I also wanted to mention, that the yarn is a lovely blend. I think it is merino, silk and remi again, but it is not super soft. So if you are someone who is a bit sensitive towards the softness of yarns, I would not recommend that you use this particular yarn for a garment, but it's a great sock yarn, for example, as well. And for me, I'm just used to a bit more rustic yarns, it's completely fine, but it's just something that I wanted to mention. So if I were to knit this again, which I totally would, I would like to make it a bit shorter. I think it's fine, but ideally I would like it to be a bit shorter. But of course, since this is knitted from the bottom up, this would not be an easy fix for me. So I'm just keeping it as is. And in general, I think this pattern really benefits from a drape yarn. So something with a linen or an alpaca, not alpaca, a silk blend, for example. I think this is, yeah, would look lovely for sure. Putting this list together was actually much harder than I expected initially, not because I could not think of 10 patterns that I wanted to show you, but because it really made me reflect on why some patterns get worn more than others. And I think it comes down to the fact that it really, what matters most is what kind of life we live and what patterns and garments suit this life, and not, you know, what's trendy, what everyone is knitting right now, what's the new release that you just saw and, you know, are now seeing everywhere. That's not really what matters. What really matters is what belongs in your life. And I would absolutely love to know, if you would have to start your handmade wardrobe over from scratch, what is the one pattern that you would like to reknit? Please share in the comments. I think this is going to be a wonderful way that we can all inspire each other. And if you enjoyed this video, I also think you are going to like this one. Until next time, happy knitting. Bye.